Hello, my name is Christy Scarrow. Welcome to Messy Leadership. We talk about the hard stuff in managing people. Today, I am thrilled to be chatting with Dave Singer. He's the president of Thomas Large and Singer. So, thank you so much for being here, Dave.
Hi, Christy. I'm happy to join you.
Wonderful. So, I always like to start with recognizing you've had a long, wonderful career. What is the important lesson that you maybe learned early in your career that's really helped shape you as a leader today?
Well, I started my career in sales, and I kind of thoroughly enjoyed my career in sales and where it's led me. But one of my managers back when I was just starting out said something that's always really stuck with me, and it was you have two ears and one mouth, and keep it in that proportion. And so I know that was told to me in kind of for sales tactics and making sure you're listening to the customer and hearing their objections, etc. But overall, it served me well in my career to date in many different situations. I might be a little bit impatient, and it's both a blessing and a curse for me in that like I try and get things done fairly quickly and maybe move quickly, but sometimes that'll trip me up. But overall, I need to make sure that I when I'm listening to an employee and I need to make sure that I'm not impatient, and I've got to hold back sometimes from making comments and just listen so that I can make sure that I've heard the whole story and get to the root of any kind of item that we're talking about. Waiting through those uncomfortable pauses and asking clarifying questions. When I force myself to be patient, I find that the information gleaned from those discussions is it always leads to better outcomes when I listen and I'm patient. And because in my position, especially, as a leader, if I jump in with the solution before I have the full picture, someone who reports to me will generally just move in that direction and kind of keep their mouth shut. But generally, they'll know more about this issue than I will, and I need to make sure that I let them communicate fully to me, or else maybe I'll send them off on the wrong path, and then they think, hey, Dave probably knows more than I do, but in reality, it's the other way around. And so I just need to make sure that I'm patient, I listen, and wait through those uncomfortable pauses, etc., where you can kind of all of a sudden you get a whole bunch more information. And that has always led to better outcomes for me. And something that I have to work on really every day is just like slow down, be patient, listen to everything, and make sure you get to the root of it before you might send someone off on the wrong path.
I can totally relate to that in a couple of ways. One is, my background is coming from sales as well. And I think that was an important lesson. It has to be about listening. And it's something I try to impart to new salespeople, but absolutely see the connection. And I'm a fairly impatient, get to the action kind of person myself. So I
Yeah.
get that kind of frazzled bit. So just building on that a tiny bit, then what are the things that help you to be more patient or to pause in the moment? So what gets you there? What allows you to get in that space?
It's really just reminding myself to be an active listener, to wait through the pauses. The pauses are uncomfortable, especially when, if you're in sales, especially, you always want to fill those pauses with reasons, etc., that, to support your point or where you're trying to direct the conversation. But really, it's just to stop for a moment and watch the other person and be patient. And so for me, that's something that I need to work on, in every aspect of my life. And so it's kind of a regular thing, that something in the back of my mind, well, I've got all those thousands of thoughts going on in the front of my mind. It's slow down and be patient. And so it's just actively listening to my head to make sure that I slow myself down. And sometimes, I'm not sure if everybody feels like this, but you're like, I might lose that thought that I have, but just find ways and find ways and tools that might be able to support you in that. And you could put a piece of paper in front of you and write down that thought so that you've got it for later, and then that'll actually slow you down as well. Like stopping, I'm writing something down and I'm still listening, but it adds to that ability to stop and think and be patient.
Yeah. And for me, that's two things. It's the pause, which I know if someone's with salespeople, especially like they want to fill the silence. If there's an objection, let me just tell you everything, right? And
Yeah,
it's in the people who sometimes are processing, not as not and need the time to pause and think. You want to fill the sentence in for them. And so I
yeah,
think recognizing don't, it's okay, let it sit, don't answer the question, stare uncomfortably at them if I have to. But yeah, I think maybe not as ideal, but it's yeah, that pause
yeah.
piece I think is important, and being okay to be comfortable in a pause, I think is really good advice.
And just being comfortable with the person you're with as well is and that comes from setting the groundwork prior, that the person feels comfortable to be able to open up to you as well. So yeah, I think that's
That's
part.
true. Because you can sit there quietly, but if they don't feel like it's a safe space to share, it's not gonna be very valuable, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I do want to build on one last thing. One thing you said about sales, because obviously I agree with you. The number one skill is listening, and I think that's very true for leaders as well. But the other thing you have to do in sales is influence change. And so I'm curious from your perspective, like how maybe that skill connects to how you are as a leader today, or some of the things you learned in that space.
Well, I guess so driving change and trying to get someone to understand your perspective and maybe how it differs from their perspective. I guess this might be a theme of our call, but it's listening, it's getting to the root of their issue and hearing them. Again, they might know more than you do. And so you'll have your perspectives on which way this right solution is or the path forward is. But unless you totally, get to the root of their problem and listen to all aspects of whatever you're discussing, you're not gonna be able to convince anyone of change. You need to get them to buy in to what you're saying, and unless you have really good points and have heard their objections and have real solutions that differ from where they're pointed, that they can buy in on, you're not going to get there. And so you really need to establish that foundation of I totally deeply understand the issue we're talking about, and I deeply understand how you would like to address it, but here are my objections or thoughts around that. And again, it's about getting to the deep core of the issue and listening for me throughout to make sure that you can think about all aspects of the item. Because if you rush in and you're speaking too early about, no, I think you should do this, and then they have some objection that makes absolute sense, you've kind of hurt your credibility a bit. And so credibility, it's very difficult to rebuild once you've had it eroded. And so that's something that I always watch out for, especially with my salespeople, is how is your credibility, and make sure you protect it as much as possible.
Yeah, I think that idea of trust being foundational again is kind of in your statement there. And that idea back to, I think that is a mistake a lot of leaders make. Now I can tell people what to do. Now I can direct them. So I love that your reminder of it's not really about that. It's about kind of engaging them in the how, and active listening still is essential, whether you're just, trying whenever you're trying to sell anything or understand somebody better.
Yeah, agreed.
So patience, you said, is something you're working on, as am I. I'd love to know sort of other messy bits of leadership that are still challenging that you spend time on trying to develop in yourself.
Yeah, I love your messy leadership title of the podcast, and it is messy at times. And so this question really, I think, one of the places where I have challenges, but I have tools, and I to address some of these challenges in my mind that I use. But managing, I've got amazingly talented people in my organization, and some of those people might not have the most empathetic lean in towards being a leader. And so, but these people are key to the organization, and they're the ones who get it done. And you absolutely respect everything that they do, but maybe how they do it is something that you need to work on with them. And so I find driving the self-awareness in them is sometimes incredibly difficult. But for me, and I guess I kind of go back to my theme, that is the key for me is to provide constructive feedback on a regular basis. But that feedback is tough to get for a leader, a leader managing a leader, because how are you going to get the feedback from below them? And because the feedback is, it's tough to have the feedback going bottom up for constructive feedback, because that's always an uncomfortable situation for an employee to give to their boss. It generally has to come from the top down. I'd love it to come from bottom up, but that's not going to be happening as frequently as I would hope. And so the problem, how do you get to that feedback to provide? So how do I get the information from that group below and get it to the manager so that they can be more effective? And so managing by walking around is something that I try to do quite a bit. Get to know people at all levels of the organization so we can create, again, going back to that safe and open environment, the trust. And so you can talk about family, personal issues, have some jokes. It really doesn't matter, but it lets you build that true relationship with someone so that they can have trust and comfort. And then you can ask for that feedback, and hopefully it'll be unadulterated and be provided unaided if there's an issue or concern in the future. And so that's one way, and that takes a lot of groundwork to do. You've got to build trust and a culture of trust across the organization. You've got to be approachable, and you've got to be there so that people see you and can have the access. And so that's what I really try to work on quite a bit. And just to be there and around and be familiar with everyone. And the bigger an organization gets, the tougher that becomes. But I think you really have to do it. And so building those true relationships is key. But another way of doing it with the tools, sort of the HR tools, is the 360 approach. And those reports can provide some incredible insights into your organization and the teams. And that allows you to properly evaluate your leadership. And the goal is always to increase retention and provide an incredible, fun and safe and dynamic environment for your employees to spend the majority of their daily life. And in this new world of the hybrid work, walking by managing around is that much more difficult. And so on the days when you're in, you have to really focus on it, and you have to kind of clear part of your day to make sure that you're actually actively doing it. It's easy to just kind of sit in front of your computer and try to get through all the millions of things that everybody has on their list every day. But I think it's really important to be able to have that rapport with everyone so you can figure out, how is my leadership doing? And that is going to be one of the most effective uses of your time. It's not, answering a couple of emails, but to make sure you know what's going on those teams where you've got numerous people that might not be nearly as productive as they could be because maybe the leadership isn't getting them to where they need to be. So that's something that I try to do is the walking around piece. And then on top of that, because of hybrid work, more and more, probably we're going to have to use the tools. And as organizations get bigger and bigger, you use the tools. But 360 and external professional leadership training are items that I would use to try to address those leaders that are incredibly talented, even not just leaders, but employees who are incredibly talented who just might not have the best EI.
So I love what you said there. So many great things about finding that balance between the, walking around and getting to know people personally, which becomes challenging. But I do find some managers, think that they have to, that's a waste of time, right? If I'm in the office and I'm just talking to people, it's a waste of time. But it's absolutely not. And as you said, the building of emotional intelligence kind of has to happen in that same way by those personal connections. So that idea of balancing the formalized 360 and also getting people to really know each other one-on-one, I think is a really important guidance that you're offering there.
Yeah, I mean, the new world of, communicating through electronic means for almost everything we do is a cold, medium to use. And, we all know face-to-face is an entirely different way of communicating, and it drives a different relationship with someone. If you've only met someone on video for years, you have an entirely different relationship with someone who you've spent the same amount of hours with personally. You're going to read a lot more body language. You're going to learn a lot more about that person. And so, yeah, I do. It's hard. You got to carve it out of your day, but it is the most important, or one of the most important things I think that you can do. And the bigger an organization is, then the more complex, the more and more you kind of have to do it and make sure you put aside that time.
Totally agree. So I'll ask you just one last question, which I think is really important, is what advice would you have for people who are struggling to manage others?
So again, I think that all three questions I've been like going back to a similar theme, but I guess the question would be if you're struggling to influence others, then have you taken the time to build the trust with them? Because again, it's the buy-in. You're going to need people to align with you and to move forward. And even if they move forward and they're not aligned, that's not going to be, it's not going to be a good culture. That's not going to be a good work environment for them. So you really need people to buy in, and to buy in, I think you still need that base of trust so that you're really operating at all levels together, not just on those one task, one item or within a task, and that they can bring more of a broader scope. Like, I might not think that this little issue or this question I have is relevant. I don't feel comfortable asking it, so I'm not going to ask it. Meanwhile, I have no idea that that's an issue. Please ask it, and feel safe to ask it. I'm not going to, be upset that it's a silly question ever. And so you've got to take your time for the lunches, the chats in the hall, again, walking around, have the impromptu discussions at the outset of a call. Everybody, you get on a call and there's 10 people on the call, and it's like, okay, we could get right into work, or are we going to chat for a second and be like, oh, how is the weather, and how are your kids, and following up on what you might have talked about last time to show, hey, I listened last time, I know what you're up to, and like, did you solve that issue, how is that thing going, whatever. And I know, it's a lot of your day. It's like 5-10 minutes of a 30-minute or an hour meeting, but that's important. And I know, you just got to get it off your list. Tick, let's go to the next one. But it is important to have those human conversations so that you can build the trust, so that you can get alignment and the buy-in from your team, and they're going to be that much better. They're going to be that much better on the work that they're doing. And so, yeah, you just need a culture of trust and humanity at really the core of your business. And once you have it, you're going to feel, the employee especially is going to feel much more confident in having those tough discussions or asking the deep questions to determine back, what's the root of the issue, so that we're making sure we don't miss it. And why aren't they listening? Maybe you haven't heard what the issue is properly. And so in the back of their mind, they're thinking that's a stupid idea he just said. But and you don't want that to happen. So sit back, be patient, listen, build the trust, and make sure that you give your team the audience and the time that they need to be able to communicate effectively. And I think that ends up building that culture of trust and support. And you just want to, make sure that everybody is doing well and you're listening to their issues. And I think that allows you to have influence. You can't, I don't think it's just like they're the boss, and because they're the boss, they're gonna be smarter than me, and they're all these kind of preconceived notions. You have to earn all of that, and that doesn't come easy.
I love how you've left that. I think it's very powerful, the need to earn trust and build trust, and how it's foundational. And I even liked your culture of humanity, because I think that's a wonderful thing that all leaders should aspire to in all organizations. And I know I've seen your team in action, and I've seen the openness and the trust and the willingness to debate, which suggests that that's a culture that you are encouraging. So I really am thankful that you're here to share the stories with the audience. I really appreciate it. For my listeners, if you're looking at ways to navigate the messy bits of leadership in your life, you can find links in the resources in the show notes, or you can find me at christyscaro.com. Thank you so much again, Dave, for your time.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.